So, what you doing there, Dante?
Studying for my Avatar history test.
Oh, have I got the thing for you. From the history of the 100-Year War to all the excitement that happened after, let's dive into some of our favorite chapters in Avatar history with this history recap playlist.
And when you're ready for more history lessons, watch Avatar, Braving the Elements here on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
What critical events shaped the 100-Year War?
In our hands is the most successful empire in history. It's time we expanded it.
The 100-Year War, also known as the Great War, began with Fire Lord Sozin.
I've seen the colony, Sozin. How dare you occupy Earth Kingdom territory?
Avatar Roku could have prevented Sozin's goal to expand the Fire Nation, but he didn't.
I'm sparing you, Sozin. I'm letting you go in the name of our past friendship. But I warn you, even a single step out of line will result in your permanent end.
Fire Lord Sozin would not repay that kindness. Not when the Avatar was in a life or death situation.
It's too much! Please.
Without you, all my plans are suddenly possible.
Roku passed at age 70. 12 years later, a great comet arrived, one that would amplify the power of firebending by 100 suns. Dreadfully, Sozin used that power for mass destruction.
The timing was perfect to change the world. I knew the next Avatar would be born an air nomad, so I wiped out the air temples.
The Airbender annihilation marked the beginning of the 100-Year War, a war that continued to devastate the other nations.
And how was it Great-Grandfather Sozin managed to win the Battle of Han Tui?
Great-grandfather won because
even though his army was outnumbered, he cleverly calculated his advantages. The enemy was downwind and there was a drought. Their defenses burned to a crisp in minutes.
Fire Lord Sozin was a powerful leader, although despite victories in battle, one failure haunted him.
Somehow the new Avatar eluded me. I've wasted the remainder of my life searching in vain. I know he's hiding out there somewhere. The Fire Nation's greatest threat. The Last Airbender.
His heir, Fire Lord Azulon, continued Sozin's efforts. The Earth Kingdom city of Taku was once an important trading post. It's home to a herbalist institute that used to send medicine across the world. This was one of the first Earth Kingdom cities destroyed by the Fire Nation, likely Azulon's first major victory. Not much is known about the Battle of Garsai, other than it was important enough to be mentioned in Azulon's funeral.
Azulon, you were our fearless leader in the Battle of Garsai, our matchless conqueror of the Husin provinces.
Many believe that the Husin provinces turned into more Fire Nation colonies. 35 years into the war, Azulon began his most heinous effort.
You're a waterbender! I've never met another waterbender from our tribe.
That's because the Fire Nation wiped them all out.
That's right. Azulon's army began raids on the southern water tribes, capturing every bender they could. Their numbers quickly dwindled. Hama, a lone survivor, was one of the last ones defending the tribe.
Finally, I too was captured. I was led away in chains, the last waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe.
While those prisoners remained captive, the Southern Water Tribe was left without a single waterbender for almost 50 years. But we all know that Hama eventually escaped from her prison, and she did so using a new, fearfully powerful technique: bloodbending. It is speculated that the bloodbender's escape was the reason these raids continued roughly 60 years after they began. It would also explain why they were even worse this time around.
My source says there's one waterbender left in the Southern Water Tribe. We're not leaving until we find the waterbender.
it's me. Take me as your prisoner.
I'm afraid I'm not taking prisoners today.
The next major event in the 100-Year War occurred at the Earth Kingdom's largest city, Ba Sing Se.
If the city is as magnificent as its wall, Ba Sing Se must be something to behold. I hope you all may see it someday. If we don't burn it to the ground first.
Known as the Impenetrable City, the dual-walled stronghold faced an invasion that lasted nearly 2 years. But in the end, the Earth Nation prevailed.
I acknowledge my defeat at Ba Sing Se. After 600 days away from home, my men were tired, and I was tired. And I'm still tired.
Many attribute that outcome to the death of one important soldier.
Iroh has lost his son. Your cousin, Lu Ten, did not survive the battle.
The impact of Lu Ten's death on Iroh was no secret. Though even as this general gave up fighting, there was another, more important change in leadership.
As was your dying wish, you are now succeeded by your second son. Hail Fire Lord Ozai!
Fire Lord Azulon had died in the 95th year of war. Few would learn years later that Azulon had actually been poisoned at the will of his second son, the new Fire Lord. 4 years later, Avatar Aang emerged from a ball of ice to an awfully unbalanced world.
Firebenders? They were here?
Rumors began to spread across the world of the Avatar's return. Hope returned as well, as evident by small pockets of insurgents. One ship of Earth Kingdom prisoners was lost to a revolt.
Here's your chance, Earthbenders! Take it! Your fate is in your own hands!
And another occupied village was disrupted by a flood.
This was a victory, Katara. Remember that. The Fire Nation is gone and this valley will be safe.
But when Avatar Aang was captured by Admiral Zhao and the Yuyan archers, resistance arrived in an unexpected form.
Who are you? What's going on? Are you here to rescue me? I'll take that as a yes.
The man behind the blue spirit? Fire Lord Ozai's son, Prince Zuko. The banished prince needed to capture Aang himself to regain his honor, so Zuko took the victory away from his peer, Admiral Zhao. But in doing so, Zuko made a powerful enemy.
I didn't know you were skilled with broadswords, Prince Zuko.
I'm not. They're antiques, just decorative.
Have you heard of the blue spirit, General Iroh?
Just rumors. I don't think he is real.
He's real, all right. He's a criminal and an enemy of the Fire Nation. But I have a feeling justice will catch up with him soon.
The discovery of Zuko's secret led to an attempted assassination.
Oh!
Meanwhile, the Avatar and his allies discovered Earth Kingdom refugees in the Northern Air Temple. These refugees were being forced to build weapons for the Fire Nation, so Team Avatar helped liberate them. This had dire consequences, though, because in the process, they unknowingly handed the Fire Nation a game-changing invention.
This defeat is the gateway to many victories.
Conflict arose further north as the Fire Navy approached their next target. Admiral Zhao brought his fleet to the doorstep of the Northern Water Tribe. Aided by a reinstated General Iroh, the Fire Navy waited until morning to attack. It was a 2-day assault, one that even the Avatar wasn't powerful enough to stop at first.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
What happened?
I must have taken out 12 Fire Navy ships, but there's just too many of them.
Zhao's fleet anchored on the first night. It was known that the moon amplified a waterbender's power. The next day, the Fire Nation breached the tribe's defense.
The Water Tribe can try to resist the inevitable, but their city will fall today.
As the Fire Nation battled the Northern Water Tribe, Admiral Zhao snuck into the tribe's sacred space, the Spirit Oasis. This was home to the Moon and Ocean Spirit, and by taking out the Moon Spirit, the power of waterbending would be erased from this world.
Whatever you do to that spirit, I'll unleash on you tenfold! Let it go now!
He succeeded, briefly, until Princess Yue surrendered herself to become the New Moon Spirit. That sacrifice, along with the Avatar and the Ocean Spirit, secured a victory for the Northern Water Tribe. Admiral Zhao was lost in battle. Winter concluded without further incident. In spring of the 100th year, the Fire Nation invaded the second largest city in the Earth Kingdom, Omashu.
The day of the invasion, I asked King Bumi what he wanted to do. He looked me in the eye and said,
I'm going to do nothing.
Omashu's main industry was making weapons for war. So when King Bumi surrendered, it did not bode well for the rest of the Earth Kingdom. Ba Sing Se was faced with another assault by the Fire Nation. This time, the invaders planned to break through the city's protective walls by unconventional means.
This drill is a feat of scientific ingenuity and raw destructive power. Once it tunnels through the wall, our troops will storm their city. The Earth Kingdom will finally fall, and you can claim Ba Sing Se. Nothing can stop us.
The Earth Kingdom army was totally unprepared for such a machine. Even Team Avatar struggled for a solution.
There's the inner mechanism where we are now, and the outer shell. The inner part and the outer part are connected by these braces. If we cut through them, the entire thing will collapse.
This was a major victory for the Earth Kingdom.
We lost.
The machine also proved to the Earth King that there was, in fact, a war going on. Until now, the king had been gaslighted by his police force, the Dai Li. His Highness had no clue there had been a war raging his entire life.
Surely you don't believe these children instead of your most loyal attendant?
Dai Li, arrest Longfeng. I want him to stand trial for crimes against the Earth Kingdom.
Team Avatar stopped the takeover from the outside, but not the inside.
We are the Earth King's humble servants.
Disguised as a Kyoshi warrior, Fire Lord Ozai's daughter infiltrated the city. Princess Azula established control over the Dai Li, and the coup of Ba Sing Se was swift. Eventually, after the perceived death of Avatar Aang, the impenetrable city was taken.
We've done it, Zuko. It's taken 100 years, but the Fire Nation has conquered Ba Sing Se.
The Fire Nation had come closer to conquering the entire Earth Kingdom than ever before, but there was still a dangerous variable.
General Shainu, your report.
Thank you, sir. Ba Sing Se is still under our control. However, Earthbender rebellions have prevented us from achieving total victory in the Earth Kingdom.
What are you suggesting, sir? When the comet last came, my grandfather, Fire Lord Sozin, used it to wipe out the air nomads. Now, I will use its power to end the Earth Kingdom. Permanently.
If not sooner, the 100-year war would be decided during the return of Sozin's comet. But there was another celestial event shortly before, an eclipse. Without the sun, firebenders would be powerless, so the Resistance chose this moment to invade the Fire Nation capital. It appeared to be the biggest organized retaliation against the Fire Nation yet.
When this is finished, the Avatar will have defeated the Fire Lord. We will have control of the Fire Nation capital, and this war will be over.
Unfortunately, Avatar Aang did not reach Fire Lord Ozai during the 8-minute eclipse. The invasion failed.
You're our only chance in the long run. You and Sokka have to go with Aang somewhere safe. It's the only way to keep hope alive.
The youngest of our group should go with you. The adults will stay behind and surrender. We'll be prisoners, but we'll all survive this battle.
This day was a failure for the Resistance in part, though a key ally would be liberated. Prince Zuko took the opportunity of the eclipse to stand up to his father, officially severing ties with Fire Lord Ozai's regime.
I'm going to join the Avatar, and I'm going to help him defeat you.
Really?
Elsewhere, an even larger victory against the Fire Nation emerged, in Omashu.
An eclipse? That'll do it.
King Bumi liberated the city after patiently biding his time. Omashu, which had been briefly renamed New Ozai, was purged of its Fire Nation invaders.
What do you think you're doing?
Taking back my city. You've got no firepower, and it's payback time!
In the short time between the eclipse and the comet, Zuko played a critical role in rescuing prisoners from a containment camp at Boiling Rock. This was the first successful escape from the Fire Nation's most advanced maximum security prison.
Sorry, Warden. Your record is officially broken.
The escape led Princess Azula to the Western Air Temple, where her forces nearly captured Zuko and Aang. Team Avatar got away. The Resistance were free to regroup and strategize. And it all led up to this. 100 years after it departed, Sozin's comet returned. Its presence fueled firebenders like gasoline. The 100-Year War came down to 3 central battles. The first occurred in Ba Sing Se. A charge was led by the Order of the White Lotus, a group of master benders from every nation, directed by former General Iroh.
When I was a boy, I had a vision that I would one day take Ba Sing Se. Only now do I see that my destiny is to take it back from the Fire Nation, so the Earth Kingdom can be free again.
The second major battle happened on a smaller scale. It was in Agni Kai for the Fire Nation throne.
Zuko, you must return to the Fire Nation so that when the Fire Lord falls, you can assume the throne and restore peace and order. But Azula will be there, waiting for you.
I can handle Azula.
Not alone. You'll need help.
You're right. Katara, how would you like to help me put Azula in her place?
It would be my pleasure.
Finally, the battle at Wulong Forest would decide a trajectory for the rest of the world. Fire Lord Ozai, now the self-proclaimed Phoenix King, led an army to eradicate the Earth Nation. But one challenger intervened. It was the boy who had eluded Ozai and his forefathers for a century. Avatar Aang, the Last Airbender.
Fire Lord Ozai, you and your forefathers have devastated the balance of this world, and now you shall pay the ultimate price!
The passing of Sozin's comet drew great power and great destruction, and in the end, the Fire Nation's army fell. The airships were destroyed. Ba Sing Se was liberated. Azula was defeated by Katara of the Southern Water Tribe, and interestingly enough, it was Azula's namesake, Fire Lord Azulon, who had originally tried to eradicate waterbenders in the Southern Water Tribe. Had Azulon succeeded? Perhaps so would have Azula. But most importantly, Ozai's reign ended when the Phoenix King was stripped of his firebending powers entirely. An absolutely unheard of feat. The war was over.
I promised my uncle that I would restore the honor of the Fire Nation. And I will. The road ahead of us is challenging. 100 years of fighting has left the world scarred and divided. But with the Avatar's help, we can get it back on the right path and begin a new era of love and peace.
Avatar Aang learned to bend the 4 elements, defeated the Phoenix King, and ended the 100-Year War all before the age of 13. Now let's dive into his next chapter. This is the complete timeline of Aang after Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now that Zuko was crowned as the Fire Lord, there was a new chance for peace among the 4 nations. Aang and Katara also finally figured out what they meant to each other. And so did Sokka, to his mild frustration. Team Avatar was able to celebrate for the first time in a long while that night. As they watched the fireworks, the mood became somber when Zuko asked Aang to make him a promise. If he should ever start to rule like his father Ozai, Zuko told Aang to end him. The young Avatar was hesitant, but agreed, hoping they would never be put in that situation. 1 year later, however, after several assassination attempts from Ozai loyalists, Zuko began to act erratically. He secluded himself and withdrew his support to remove Fire Nation colonies from the Earth Kingdom. Worried, Team Avatar immediately traveled to the city of Yu Dao to try to talk things out before it came to violence. Unfortunately, that failed. The Fire Nation citizens living there were furious and fought back to keep their homes. Aang and Zuko even took shots at each other, each refusing to back down until Katara stepped in. The two of them calmed down and decided to meet later to work out what would hopefully be a peaceful agreement. Later in Ba Sing Se, Aang and Katara met with the Earth King, who uncharacteristically planned to send an entire army to take back his land. Failing to convince him otherwise, Aang and Katara rushed back to Yudao. By the time they arrived, the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom forces were already face-to-face on the battlefield. Jumping into action, Team Avatar did everything in their power to slow down the fight. Aang, meanwhile, sought counsel in the spirit world with Avatar Roku. Unable to forget his betrayal at the hands of Fire Lord Sozin, Roku simply advised his reincarnated self that a promise is a promise. Aang, however, refused to accept that. Ignoring Roku's advice, he realized that the four nations shouldn't be divided by borders any longer, and that Zuko had been right all along. Aang rushed back to talk to Zuko and ended up saving his friend's life in the Avatar state after he nearly fell to his death. When the dust settled, the Earth King was convinced to allow the Fire Nation colonists to stay. After Zuko recovered from the battle, he and Aang also quickly patched things up. While it tested their friendship, breaking a promise turned out to be the best thing for both of them. Zuko vowed to find his lost mother, and Aang was inspired to form a new group of acolytes to revive the air nomad culture. Soon after, Aang, Katara, and Sokka joined Zuko to search for his mother Ursa. But the clue to her location came at a cost. Princess Azula would be tagging along this adventure. The gang reluctantly agreed, and as expected, they were barely able to keep up with her bizarre antics. As they flew to a remote village, Azula jumped from a deadly height off an airborne Appa. Aang immediately flew down to save her, but she shot a blue firebolt through his glider. Chaotic as usual, Azula then used her lightning to save Team Avatar from a giant wolf spirit, and cautiously, they all traveled the rest of the way. That night, Team Avatar stayed with two friendly actors named Norin and Noriko, who told them they might find answers about Ursa in the nearby Forgetful Valley. Aang and his friends quickly traveled there and found the place rife with spiritual energy. As they walked deeper into the forest, they met two Water Tribe siblings, Misu and her masked brother Rafa. These two were looking for a powerful spirit known as the Mother of Faces. Aang offered his help and meditated into the spirit world to convince the ancient Mother of Faces to grant Rafa and Misu one wish. Before Aang could get the words out, though, Azula rushed forward and took the spirit's wish, demanding to know where Ursa was. The Mother of Faces revealed she had helped Ursa start a new life by giving her a new face and wiping away all of her old memories. Ursa was now, in fact, the woman they met earlier, Noriko. Azula took off after her mother, and Zuko and Sokka chased after. Meanwhile, Aang and Katara tried to talk the Mother of Faces into a second wish for Rafa and Misu, but she became enraged. The ancient spirit commanded her followers to attack, and while fighting them off, Aang accidentally blew off Rafa's mask. What they saw was shocking. Rafa had no face, and Aang immediately knew this was the work of the spirit Ko, the Face Stealer. Learning that Ko was actually the estranged son of the Mother of Faces, Aang informed her that he had once spared his life. Regretful on her son's actions, the Mother of Faces relented and gave Rafa back his face. Back in the village, Zuko prevented Azula's ambush on Noriko, but not before his sister revealed to her that she was her daughter. In the chaos, Azula escaped, but with the knowledge of her true self, Ursa ran to the Mother of Faces and convinced her to grant back her memories and old appearance. For the first time in almost a decade, Zuko got to see his mother. Aang and the rest of Team Avatar then got to watch a long, overdue, and happy family reunion. A few months later, Aang was inspired to revive Avatar Yangchen's festival in a territory that was once air nomad land. When Team Avatar arrived with the air acolytes, however, they found it polluted by a massive refinery built over the sacred grounds. Aang was horrified, but a brilliant young engineer named Satoru showed up and made fast friends with Toph. Satoru offered to show Team Avatar around, but it got tense quickly. Aang was not excited when Toph agreed to partner her Metalbending academy with the refinery. Despite his concern, Aang and the Air Acolytes continued to celebrate Yangchen's festival, and soon Aang was able to connect with his past life. But the conversation was cut short by an earthquake. Aang rushed back to the refinery and found Katara, Toph, and several other people trapped in a mine deep underground. Toph's Metalbending students fortunately arrived just in time, and together with Aang were able to save everyone. Afterwards, Aang reconnected with Yangchen and learned the origin of her festival was to calm an angry spirit named General Old Iron. At that exact moment, the construction of the refinery finally awoke the giant spirit, who refused to talk and immediately attacked. Aang, Toph, and her Metalbending students then banded together to defeat General Old Iron and forced him to retreat. Even if the festival didn't quite work out, there was a reason to celebrate once again. With the support of the Air Acolytes, Aang reformed Yang Chen's holiday into the Spirits Friendship Festival to preserve Air Nomad traditions while still allowing the sacred lands to modernize. Later, while Katara and Sokka traveled to the South Pole, Aang took a trip to the Fire Nation to help Zuko handle a new threat: dark spirits known as the Kemurikage. Seeming to be angered, these ancient spirits were stealing children from homes all around the capital. Looking for answers, Aang, Zuko, Mei, and her new boyfriend Kalo visited the Dragonbone catacombs, which held secrets of the Fire Nation's past. While at the crypt of the first Fire Lord, Aang contacted a Kemurikage spirit who told him that their kind hadn't left the spirit world in thousands of years. That meant the kidnappers weren't the Kemurikage at all. They were human. The next night, however, the imposters escalated the situation by kidnapping Zuko's half-sister Kiyi. Aang and Zuko tried to stop them unsuccessfully, but in the chase realized their leader was none other than Azulon. The next day, after some investigation, Aang showed Zuko a secret passageway which led to a Fire Nation graveyard. They went through, and Azula and her cloaked friends attacked as soon as they came out the other side, but Aang and Zuko fought them off. Hearing the cries of the children, Aang then ran into a nearby tomb to help, but was knocked out when the imposters spent smoke into his lungs. Fortunately, Mei and Kalo were close by to assist. When Zuko confronted Azula, she insisted that her brother was more like her than he realized. And just like she arrived, Azula vanished in a puff of smoke. The missing children were soon found, and shortly thereafter, Aang stood close by as Zuko addressed the Fire Nation humbly. Unlike his father, he vowed to work to be a better ruler for his people. As the crowd cheered, Azula watched coldly from a distance before disappearing once again to plan her next devious scheme. With the fake Kemurikage dealt with, Aang got some free time and traveled to the Southern Water Tribe to rejoin Katara and Sokka. Per usual, Aang was immediately thrown into conflict when a Water Tribe radical named Gilok tried to overthrow Katara's father as chieftain. After putting a stop to their attack at a festival, Team Avatar met with Hakoda and other Four Nation leaders to form a plan. Gilok and his forces, however, used the opportunity to attack and capture Hakoda. Aang and Katara were able to save him, but Gilok still got away with the Earth King. The conflict turned into a hostage situation over a perilous chasm called the Bridge of No Return. Team Avatar and even Toph's Metalbending students fought side by side once again, this time assisted by metal armor to prevent chi blocking. Gilok's forces were quickly subdued, but the Radicalists still refused to surrender and tried to take as many people with him as possible. Gilok fell to his death right then and there, but Aang and Katara sprang into action. After some daring rescues, Team Avatar welcomed a few new members to the group that night, and Aang finally got a chance to feast with all his friends. Nearly 2 years after the end of the 100-Year War, the small town around Satoru's refinery had grown into a small city now called Cranefish Town. When Aang and Team Avatar came to visit, they hardly recognized the place. They also found themselves stuck in the middle of a bending supremacist movement when Toph was nearly blown up. She managed to save herself with some last-second metal bending, but Team Avatar knew they needed to intervene. With some clever disguises and a sharp-looking wig for Aang, the gang infiltrated an underground meeting of the supremacists. The element of surprise was blown, though, when Toph lost her patience with their leader Li Ling and a fight broke out. The gang came out on top, and upon arresting Li Ling, Toph suggested to Aang that he take away her bending. Conflicted, Aang hesitated and Li Ling escaped. Desperate, the supremacist leader then started an uprising against the entire town. It was a hard battle, but in the end, Aang decided not to take away Li Ling's bending to avoid any more tension between benders and non-benders. A few days later, the citizens of Cranefish Town were united again in a common goal. They were going to rebuild their homes together. Team Avatar decided to settle down in Cranefish Town that day and would eventually help in its formation into Republic City. Over the next few decades, Republic City became the new state's capital and the home to people from all over the Four Nations. During this time, Aang and Katara also got married and had 3 kids. The oldest was Bumi, named after Aang's childhood friend, then Kaya, a waterbender, and their youngest was Tenzin, who turned out to be the only airbender. As the last air nomad, Aang did his best to preserve the ways of his culture and tended to isolate Tenzin, spending more time with him than his non-airbending kids. The favoritism created some distance between Tenzin, Bumi, and Kaya, but ultimately the whole family loved each other a great deal. At age 40, Aang joined his favorite earthbender and now chief of police, Toph Beifong, to arrest a gangster named Yakone.
Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't get involved. But if what those victims said is true, we're not dealing with a normal criminal.
Fine. Follow me, Twinkle Toes.
Aang stood by as Toph easily took Yakone into custody, but they played right into his hand. After being found guilty, he revealed that he was a bloodbending master. Yakone then knocked out the whole courtroom, including Aang, and just walked out the front door. The Avatar state kicked in, and Aang eventually defeated the bloodbender by taking away his bending abilities. But the threats that faced Republic City were growing by the day.
It's over.
While Aang had been protected by the Avatar state when he was frozen over a century in an iceberg, the years began to catch up with his body. Only in his early 60s, Aang's health was failing, and knowing he had a short amount of time left, Aang tasked the Order of the White Lotus to search out and protect the next Avatar. It wasn't long before Aang passed away, and while his legacy would never be forgotten, the Avatar cycle continued on. Only a few years later, Aang would be revealed to be reincarnated into a rebellious young woman named Korra from the Southern Water Tribe.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
At age 17, Korra moved to the bustling streets of Republic City to learn airbending with the only living master, Aang's son Tenzin. Tenzin's family had also grown to include several airbending grandchildren for the late Aang and a now retired Katara. Together, they all tried to teach Korra, but it didn't really go to plan.
Don't force your way through! Dance! Dance like the wind! Be the leaf!
Unlike Aang, Korra struggled with the spiritual tenets of airbending and soon found herself in even deeper trouble with Amon and the Equalist plot against benders. Plagued by strange visions, Korra eventually realized Aang was attempting to warn her about the truth of Amon. He was the gangster Yakone's son and a bloodbender. It wasn't until after defeating Amon and fearing she'd lost her bending entirely that Korra was finally able to spiritually connect with Aang.
Not now, Tenzin. I just want to be left alone.
But you called me here.
Aang.
You have finally connected with your spiritual self.
With all of the past avatars by his side, Aang was able to restore Korra's bending. Aang and the other avatars continued to aid Korra in her darkest moments, and even though Aang was no longer in the physical world, he didn't stop helping his children either. When Bumi, Kaya, and Tenzin traveled to the spirit world and got stuck in the fog of lost souls, a vision of Aang appeared before his youngest son.
You are trying to hold on to a false perception of yourself. You are not me, and you should not be me. You are Tenzin.
These were just the words Tenzin needed to finally step out of his father's shadow. And after gaining back his senses, he managed to save his siblings and his daughter Jinora just in time. And that's everything we know about Aang so far. As one of the most powerful benders who brought peace, harmony, and change to the four nations, Aang's legacy spans generations and throughout the world. But what do you think? Is he the greatest Avatar of all time? Comment below and keep watching for more of your favorite Avatar moments. Toph Beifong was the blind earthbending master who trained the Avatar, invented metalbending, and helped to defeat the Fire Lord all before the age of 13. Now let's dive into our next chapter. This is the complete timeline of Toph after the 100-Year War. Luckily for the four nations, the reign of Ozai as the Phoenix King was brief.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to offend you, Phoenix King of getting his butt whooped.
After a long and hard-fought journey, Team Avatar finally had a little R&R.
Well, I think you all look perfect.
It was only a short time later, though, that Toph noticed something strange when she walked around in public. Her space metal bracelet would move around certain people. Eventually, Toph figured out these people were tapping into a rare and previously unknown ability. They were metalbenders. Excited at the prospect of teaching a whole new bending form, Toph recruited her first 3 students to the Beifong Metalbending Academy: Ho Tun, Penga, and the Dark One. One day while training, the students noticed a commotion at the nearby city of Yudao. Toph told them to get back to work, but stopped herself when she heard the sound of Appa flying overhead. If Team Avatar was nearby, there was likely something wrong, so Toph took the fast route and Earth launched herself into the sky. After a happy reunion, Toph learned Aang was on his way to Yu Dao to ease tensions between the recently crowned Fire Lord Zuko and the Harmony Restoration Movement. Even though it was Earth Kingdom land, many Fire Nation citizens still called it home, and they were willing to fight to stay there. Unfortunately, they did just that. Aang and Zuko even came to blows, each refusing to back down until Katara stepped in. The two of them calmed down and agreed to meet later with the Earth King. Hopefully, it would be peaceful. In the meantime, Toph returned to her school to check on her students, but found the three of them kicked to the curb. A gang of firebending students and their master had taken over her school, claiming it was their dojo first. Toph tried to kick them out, but the fight was destroying the building in the process. Luckily, they decided on a compromise with a rematch in 3 days for control of the academy. The Firebenders versus Hotun, Panga, and the Dark One. The odds didn't look good. It was, however, the perfect time for substitute instructor Sokka to step in and inspire the students to hone their skills together as Team Beifong. They struggled at first, but soon enough, Toph students started to believe in themselves, and they bent their way to victory. The Metalbending Academy was finally back to its rightful owner, and Toph couldn't have been more proud. Shortly after, when Aang and Zuko met again, it went the opposite of peaceful, and a full-on battle broke out. At one point, Toph and Suki found themselves pinned down by Fire Nation soldiers. They were nearly overwhelmed until a new and improved Team Beifong stepped in and turned the fight in their favor. At the battle's conclusion, Aang trusted himself to avoid hurting Zuko, and even saved his life in the Avatar state after he nearly fell to his death. In the end, the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation colonists learned how to live together in harmony, and many more promising students began to enroll at Toph's academy. About a year later, Toph joined Aang on a trip to a festival honoring Avatar Yang Chen. The Air Acolyte ceremonies reminded Toph of her strict upbringing, and for the most part, she refused to participate. When Team Avatar made it to the new industrial city of Cranefish Town, however, Toph's spirits were lifted. Even through her usual rock-hard exterior, Toph couldn't hide an obvious crush on a brilliant young engineer named Satoru. The two quickly hit it off and formed a partnership. Toph's students would provide their metalbending skills, and Satoru's company would sponsor a new building for her school. The deal was, of course, too good to be true. As Toph walked further in the refinery, she discovered her father, Lao Beifong, was a co-owner. The two had been estranged since Toph ran away from home, and Lao refused to admit that he was her father. He even threw her off the property. Toph, nevertheless, was determined to make amends. She returned to the refinery to confront her father and also tried to let him know his mining operation was unsafe. Toph took him down to show him herself, but the mine ended up collapsing on top of them. It was a close call, but Toph was of course strong enough to hold the weight, and Lao finally saw his daughter for the hero she was. Toph's students arrived to save the day once again, and understandably, their teacher collapsed from total exhaustion afterwards. It wasn't long, though, before an angry spirit named General Old Iron awoke and started to attack the refinery. Quickly recovering, Toph and her students jumped in the fight. Together, they banded with Team Avatar and sent the spirit on its way. There was a reason to celebrate in Yu Dao once again, and with the support of her father, Toph and Satoru helped to turn Earth and Fire Refinery into a bustling new business. In just a few months, Toph's Metalbending Academy was thriving with upgraded facilities and a whole new class of students. Hotun, Panga, and the Dark One were also now good enough metalbenders that they taught all the beginners on their own. The school had basically begun to run itself, and Toph was bored out of her mind. Sokka and Suki arrived one day to visit the school, and to break up the monotony, they took her to a concert, and it was with everyone's favorite traveling band, Chong and Trustfully in Love. Understandably, Toph bailed on the show. As she walked back to her school, enjoying the quiet, Toph felt something new with her seismic sense. It was an unfamiliar type of bending, and it brought her to an underground battle in an abandoned warehouse. Reminded of her days as the Blind Bandit, Toph was totally enthralled. There was a fighter in the ring named Sun who wasn't a firebender, but could seemingly melt the earth below his feet. He was a Lavabender. The only problem was that Sun hadn't learned to control it. In a later battle, Sun was nearly down for the count when he shocked the entire crowd, spraying a wall of lava toward his opponent. No one had ever seen anything like it before, and as the building began to topple, everyone fled. Fortunately, Team Beifong was close by to save the day again. Sun tried to run away in the chaos, but Toph easily caught up to him. The idea of innovating a whole new form of earthbending reinvigorated Toph's passion, And by the next day, she had a new student, and lavabending was permanently added to the curriculum. Now that Toph's academy ran like clockwork, she was able to get away from time to time to act as a representative for Earth and Fire Industries. One of her first assignments brought her back with Team Avatar, and into business with the Southern Water Tribe. Sokka and Katara were thrilled to see her again, and it was just in time before a new threat arrived. A radical Southern Water Tribe warrior named Gilok was leading an uprising spearheaded by giant drills. Team Avatar easily held Gilok's forces back, but the conflict evolved into a hostage situation at the Bridge of No Return. Team Beifong jumped into action once again, this time assisted by Sokka's inventive battle strategy: metal armor to prevent chi blocking. With his army defeated, Gilok still refused to surrender and tried to take as many people with him as possible. He fell to his death right then and there, but Aang and Katara sprang into action. After some daring rescues, Team Avatar welcomed a few new members to the group that night and remained safe, sound, and ready to feast another day. Almost 2 years after the 100-Year War, a small town around Earth and Fire Refinery had rapidly expanded into a small city called Cranefish Town. When Team Avatar came to visit, they hardly recognized the place. They also found themselves stuck in the middle of a bending supremacist movement when Toph was nearly blown up in an attack. She managed to save herself with some quick metal bending, and later, with some clever disguises, Toph helped to infiltrate an underground meeting of the supremacists. The element of surprise was blown when Toph lost her patience with their leader Li Ling, and a fight broke out. Toph launched a barrage of rocks toward Li Ling, but was caught off guard by the sheer power of her daughter Ya Ling's counterattack. For the first time, Toph was battling a young earthbender who could go toe-to-toe against her. While their fight ended in a draw, when Ya Ling met Toph at their final battle, she was determined to win. With every blow, Ya Ling got more fierce, and Toph had to adapt her bending style to keep up. She discovered she could effectively bend metal cables as a weapon, nearly getting the upper hand. Ya Ling had studied Toph's fighting techniques, however, and used her own earthbending forms against her. Toph was down for the count, and Ya Ling was prepared to end it right there. Fortunately, Toph was better at making friends and knew not to underestimate a non-bender, especially one with a boomerang. A few days later, benders and non-benders were united again in a common goal. They were going to rebuild their home together. Team Avatar decided to settle down in Cranefish Town that day and would eventually help in its formation into Republic City. As Toph grew up, she later took charge of the city's law enforcement and started an elite metal-bending police force to help keep the growing population safe. Toph became chief of police, but shortly into her career, she met a man named Kanto with whom she had a daughter named Lin. While Toph and Kanto didn't last as a couple, Toph would end up giving birth to another daughter named Su Yin. Needless to say, Toph was confident as a single parent and gave her daughters much more freedom than she ever got. At age 40, while leading the arrest of a gangster named Yakone, Toph ran into her favorite airbender.
But if what those victims said is true, we're not dealing with a normal criminal.
Fine. Follow me, Twinkle Toes.
Toph initially brushed off Aang's concerns and easily took Yakone into custody. Right after he was found guilty, however, the gangster revealed that he was a blood-bending master. He forced Toph to uncuff him and tossed her away like a rag doll to make his escape. Aang eventually defeated the Bloodbender, but the threats that faced Republic City were growing by the day. About a decade later, we would learn that Toph's daughters inherited her mastery of earthbending. Lin followed her mother's footsteps and became a full-fledged Republic City police officer. And one day on patrol, she caught her sister Su Yin participating in a gang robbery.
Su?
When Toph found out Lin arrested Su Yin, she brought the siblings into her office alone.
And what were you thinking? You two have put me in an impossible position.
It would have been a massive scandal if Republic City found out their police chief had a daughter in prison. So, Toph did the only thing she could and destroyed Lin's police report and sent her rebellious daughter to live with her grandparents. Su Yin would later travel the world, eventually founding the metal city of Zaofu, and reconciled with Toph after she retired. Lin actually ended up taking her old job as police chief, but the two were unable to resolve their differences before Toph left Republic City in search of enlightenment. Many years passed until Toph was seen again, this time by the next Avatar, Korra.
I can't believe it.
Toph was the first person to notice that the reason Korra was feeling weak was that she still had remnants of metal poison in her body from when the Red Lotus attacked her.
Are you trying to tell me you can't feel metal in your own body? You really are the worst Avatar ever.
Toph tried to heal her, but knew the only way to help Korra was to allow her to save herself.
Release the fear.
After being led through a painful vision, Korra metalbent the remaining poison out by herself and found the strength to fight again.
Well done, Korra.
Toph only got a short break before she learned her daughter Su Yin and her family had been captured in Zaofu. The former chief of police then made a long overdue reunion with her daughter Lin to launch a full-scale rescue mission.
Hey, Chief.
Hey, Chief.
After some close calls, the Beifong family escaped, and Toph, using a massive seismic wave, managed to save Lin, Su Yin, and her grandsons from Kuvira's forces at the last possible moment.
You give Metalbenders a bad name!
When they got to safety, Toph told Lin how proud she was to be her mother, and the two finally reconciled. 3 months after Kuvira's surrender, Toph was relaxing back in her swamp when she was visited by Korra and Earth King Wu, who asked her to run for governor against a dictator. Toph initially refused, but per her usual track record, she ended up fighting side by side with 3 generations of Beifongs to take down another radical army. After the fight, Earth King Wu tried to convince Toph to stay around as governor, but she refused. Sticking to her ideals, Toph went back to retirement in the swamp, simply stating that the predators there were more honest than in politics. From a blind bandit, a teacher to 2 avatars, a war hero, and matriarch of the entire Beifong family, Toph's legacy spanned generations and throughout the world. But what do you think? Is she the greatest earthbender of all time? Comment below and keep watching for more of your favorite Avatar moments.